Hello, I'm Faye Waterman and this is Talking All Things Business. And my guest today is Jacqui Brauman, a solicitor, the founder and CEO of TBA Law and Legally Wise Women. And today our topic is negotiation. I'm going to hand it over to you, Jacqui. Welcome and thank you.
Thanks so much, Faye. Happy to talk with you again. Yes, negotiation. So, there's so much in this. I think that dealing with conflict is a skill that particularly women, but so many people now either don't have or, it makes us so anxious that we don't want to deal with conflict. And so our heightened anxiety gets us into this state where our brain doesn't work, that we've spoken about before, and then we actually don't make decisions well, and we can make the situation worse. Or we run away completely, or we hand the responsibility over to someone else, a third party, usually a lawyer, to do it for you, and then you're not even in control of the outcome.
It's interesting what you said is that you look at the negotiation and the options that you have. One is to deal with it front on, two is to run away from it, or to give your power away to somebody else. It's a pretty tough thing, particularly when you're in an emotional state that you really don't think logically or logistically, and you do unintentionally give your power to somebody else. So how do you negotiate in a way that you get a result that you actually want and keep the power in your field?
Huge question.
Yes.
So, understanding more of the elements of negotiation is really important, and to also keep your head instead of losing it when you are in an emotional state, and having some tools in your toolbox first about how to calm your brain back down when you're in an emotional state is one of the first foundational things. And there's all sorts of ways of doing that, like box breathing and certain other types of breathing, keeping your feet on the ground, and some really basic sort of self-care stuff is actually really useful for negotiation.
Body language is a really important part of negotiation. You said keeping your feet on the ground. Breathing, well, that's something when we're in an heightened emotional state, we don't think about, but taking those deep breaths and taking control. But your feet on the ground and your body language is a really important part of negotiation. Wow, keep going, please.
Yes, it is. And look, there are some situations where we're just too emotional and we shouldn't actually be the one negotiating directly. And then, yes, it is valid to bring in a mediator or a negotiator to help you facilitate this negotiation. But if you do that, you also need a good understanding about the process, about what to expect, and fundamentally, what you even want out of this. Because if you're going to negotiate for what you want, the key is know what you actually want, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. And that sometimes that can be quite clouded. You kind of know what you want, but you don't really know what you want. So you have to go in with maybe a list of questions or a list or written down what you actually want, so that when you're starting the negotiation, you have that clarity.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of deep work to do before the negotiation. And that is one of the keys, to actually do some deep preparation. To think about your goals and what you want for the negotiation, rather than going in with your lowest possible point that you'll accept. Because it's interesting, again, around the brain, if you have set a low point, your brain will actually move to that. Whereas if you set a goal, your brain will move to the goal rather than your low point. So actually having a goal and having that written down is really important. And again, coming back to knowing what you want, fundamentally think about what is important here. Because if you are facilitated by a third party or represented by a lawyer often will tell you what you want, and it's not actually what you want. They will position you and tell you, you should go for this percentage, this is what is fair, blah, blah, blah. But there are bigger factors here. There is what you want for this relationship moving forward. Is there some aspects that you actually want to recover? Do you need to be able to work with this other person moving forward? Or do you want that completely ruined and have it so difficult for the next 10 years that you have to deal with this person? So there are other factors, as well as thinking about a dollar amount or, some kind of percentage or something like that. So yes, starting with good preparation is really important. And part of that preparation as well is thinking about some of these tools that will keep you calm. Having some phrases that if you need a break, you can actually just come out with this phrase that you ask for a toilet break, say you need a break, say you need to go for a walk, because those are things that you need to be able to do in, for example, a negotiation that's going to take half a day or something like that. But otherwise, if the negotiation is going to be more of a backwards and forwards in a different form, what form of communication is actually the best way to negotiate? Because you can communicate in numerous ways these days. So what actually suits this negotiation best as well is important to think about.
It's interesting, all those points that you've said, and thinking about phrases for your breaks or having a toilet break or whatever it is, because sometimes you need to stop and collect your thoughts. Or maybe, you can have a backup outside where you can just go out and vent and then come back in with a little bit more clarity or something like that. So there's lots of strategies that you can have, but are we as individuals, when we're negotiating something, aware of all these tools that we need? No, we're not.
No, you're not. And that's, again, why learning about how to negotiate and doing some preparation beforehand will actually set you up very well. Knowing as well how your brain responds, because again, going back to if you do get emotionally overwhelmed, understand that it takes 20 minutes to half an hour to actually bring your brain back under control. So you do actually need a break, and that is reasonable. It's not a sign of weakness or anything like that. You regather yourself and you come back stronger. And it's also interesting to start thinking about some of these other psychological things that are part of negotiation, to have some expectations that, yes, there is a to and fro. It is part of the game. Unfortunately, you need to play the game as much as you think that, this is pointless, let's just get to the point. No, there are psychological reasons as to why you need to do this, to both develop some kind of trust, to show reciprocity, also feel like you've both compromised or both had a win is all very important as well. And using other elements of reciprocity is very interesting in terms of not directly involved in the negotiation, but, if you have a break and there's some snacks or something, or you bring some snacks, it's quite interesting that if you offer to share your snacks with the group or with the other person, it can even create some reciprocity that then can show itself through the negotiation. Because if you have offered something, the other person feels like they have to reply. It's like this strange psychological thing about humans that we can't prevent ourselves from doing. So once you know some of these things, you can start using them to your advantage.
It's pretty interesting, just offering something, someone part of your snack or something like that has a psychological effect on them. Do you ever think that there are people that go in and negotiate, not the person that needs to negotiate to get something, but the person that they're negotiating with is someone that is not going to give in and not going to go negotiate in the way that you want them to? And how would you deal with that person? Because they're out there, aren't they?
There are. And yeah, there's a lot of tactics for negotiating with unreasonable people.
Yeah.
And also understanding what your base negotiation style is, and having a bit of a think about what you think their basic negotiation style is as well, because you can actually alter your negotiation style depending on the situation and depending on the person. So once we start with the basis of this is actually my default, However, in this situation, I realize that I'm dealing with someone who's competitive. So I actually have to step up and be a bit more competitive in my style, because there can be a whole other psychological elements there as well, that particularly competitive negotiators do not respect a whole lot of elements to other styles. And so even just by responding to them in kind can actually build respect and can bring an outcome. Whereas if they think that you're negotiating from a more collaborative style and they think that's weak, it just makes them negotiate in their position or their style stronger. So there's 5 basic negotiation styles.
Please share.
Yes, and they all sort of sit on a scale depending on how important the outcome is versus how important the relationship is. And I'm just thinking of an XY axis as I'm talking, because there are some differences in gender as a generalization as to how we negotiate. It does not mean that women can't negotiate. And in fact, there's some studies to say that women negotiating directly with women are just as effective as men negotiating directly with men. It's when there is a negotiation across genders that there can be some of these biases and things that play out. But bringing us back to the styles. So an avoidant style is someone who doesn't really have a strong feeling about the outcome, doesn't really care, and also doesn't care about the person. So that is an avoidant style. So if it's on that XY axis, they're right down here because they'll just avoid it. It's not important enough to them. Off they run. An accommodating style, and this is where most women sit. So they put their needs last, but they put the relationship fairly important, right? So it sits up here. So they are always trying to accommodate the needs of the other person because the outcome for themselves is less important than the relationship. A competitive style is usually your unreasonable person. So that is that they don't really care about the relationship and the outcome is more important to them. And again, more typically, it's a more masculine style because aren't boys raised to be competitive as well? So that's sort of their starting point. Mm-hmm. A compromising place is right in the center. So the relationship value is about equal to the importance of the outcome. And then collaborative is sort of the ultimate. But again, you can't be collaborative with a competitive person necessarily unless you're fairly skilled to sort of manipulate them into helping you solve the overall problem. Compromising and collaborative is sort of where the ultimate is, because you also get some of what you want and you also maintain some kind of working relationship.
With all the different styles, it would be really interesting to just oversee and watch, be a fly on the wall and watch some of these negotiations and how people deal with them in different ways. Those who are collaborative, those who are really go hard and don't care kind of person. Hopefully no one ever really gets those sort of people. But negotiation is all about getting, it's a win-win situation really, isn't it? When you're negotiating, or that's supposed to be a win-win situation, or as fair as possibly can be. But sometimes the negotiation, if you don't have that control over what you know you want, if you're the person negotiating to get what you want, then the negotiator will overtake and you'll get what they think you deserve. I don't like that thought.
No. And there are all those sorts of elements about leverage and power within a negotiation as well. Someone's power or perceived power of their position before a negotiation does not necessarily help during the negotiation. So again, for someone who feels like they have less power than the other person they're negotiating with, when you're in the negotiation, there is actually a lot of leverage that you can use against someone who thinks that they're more powerful. Our conversation today won't allow us much time to go into that, but just knowing that will open up the possibilities for you to be able to negotiate with someone that you think usually sits with more power than you, but to leverage their identity of themselves can actually be the way to get through to get what you want. So all sorts of tactics like making them think like they are the ones coming up with the solutions and helping to solve your problem can be one of these things that gets the person to feel like they're in control and have power, but ultimately you're using their sense of importance to solve the overall problem.
And not a good situation to be in. We could talk lots and lots about this, and maybe there is another conversation about the different types of negotiation levels, the 5, that could be talked about more in depth. What's a tip that you could give anyone that was going into a negotiation situation, really not understanding how they need to take themselves into that negotiation? What is it that you can advise them, just a couple of tips now, so that they have a better position, or they position themselves in a better way when they go into a negotiation?
I mean, all the preparation things we've spoken about are really important. Having a couple of tools to keep yourself calm, knowing your goal, those sort of things are really important. But ultimately, the best negotiation tool you can have is to listen, and to listen effectively. So as much as you want to say everything you want to say, and you have so much that you want to get across, putting that aside and realizing the other person feels the exact same way and making them feel heard is very powerful, because you gather so much information. The more information that you can gather, the more power and leverage you get in the negotiation, because the more you realize about their position and about what they want, you can use that then to get what you want. So the ultimate tip is listen.
And that is not just listening to what's being said, but listening and hearing what's not actually being said at the same time. And that's a really interesting thing. It's a skill that needs to be worked on, listening for the things that are unsaid, but they're indicated in what you're saying, if that makes sense. So but how many people who are going in for a negotiation, which is really important to them, have that emotion that prevents them from really listening?
And I think that's one of the main problems. I think that once people understand the process of negotiation and realize that their emotional state and their need to say their piece is actually getting in the way of what they want, once they have that basic understanding and they can sit in the negotiation and actually listen without fear, that is where the power comes. Because as you were saying, the active listening is just really the key. And you know what? Women actually have this as a huge strength, as a generalization again, but that is where the power lies. And that is a skill that is more naturally feminine than masculine. So there you go. We're one step ahead.
Oh, yes. Yes. Are there any other tips that you would think about before we finish this chat, Jacqui?
I think as well, the other aspects are also, as well as listening, it also means that you have to open up and be honest about what you want as well. So coming back to reciprocity a bit, giving trust also means that it will reciprocate trust. So if you know at one point you let your emotions get over the top of you and you say something that wasn't very helpful or was actually fairly attacking, then be the big enough person to be able to apologize, because apologising will actually build trust and move things forward really well as well. That's one little tip. Another also would be, because you're actively listening, start listening for what some of the shared values or shared goals are. Because as soon as you hear, oh, we actually both want what is best for mum, or we both want what is best for the kids, you can start bringing the conversation back around to what you agree to constantly, so that that's a platform to move from, and remind the other person as well that perhaps the differences are not so great, and you can build from there.
It's a very powerful situation to be in, to negotiate something. And I think that we all really need to have those skills. So, or someone like you to have the conversation with, to be prepared if we're going into a negotiation somewhere along the line. And this is where your Legally Wise Women come into it, where you can educate women to be able to learn to negotiate whatever it is that they need, be it going out of a relationship, negotiating for what their children should and shouldn't have. So many things. It could be a workplace negotiation, which you could also help them with as well. Because I suppose when we really think about it, we negotiate things all the time, but that we don't think about that as negotiation, do we?
That's right. And look, negotiation is a more specific skill within the skill of being able to influence. And so, yes, in a lot of conversations, we are trying to influence an outcome, and it happens more often than we think. By developing those skills, we can also approach hard conversations with much more confidence, so that they then don't spiral into a conflict. Wouldn't it be great if we knew that we wouldn't make a situation worse if we had an early conversation and everyone could move forward without a conflict arising in the first place?
That would be wonderful, but that's just not how life pans out, is it? It's like, the conflict starts, then the negotiation has to happen, instead of having that conversation first and trying to sort things out in the first instant. It just builds up to where you have to have that negotiation there.
Yeah, but I'll challenge you on that, Faye, because imagine if more of us had the skill to have those hard conversations, and it never spiraled into a conflict, and half the conflicts in our life never arose in the first place. I mean, how much easier would life be?
It would be wonderful, absolutely wonderful, if there was no conflict in the world at all. But that's, and what's going on in the world right now is a sure indication of the conflict, because there are so many emotions flying around that nobody really understands. And the people that are really the frustrated ones probably don't really understand how or what to do with the emotions that are so high to negotiate and get what they want. It's very interesting. It's very interesting times. Anything else before we finish, Jacqui?
Look, I think that it's just a really good starting point, everything that we've shared today. And, if people do want to learn more about not necessarily hard conflicts, but certainly having difficult conversations, and at least being able to prepare and understand the negotiation process, then, reaching out is the starting point.
Yeah, so reaching out to you, Jacqui Brauman at Legally Wise Women, so that you can support them in their whatever area they need. All the conversations that we've had, negotiation is just one of them. But if they contact you, then they can start to learn how to take more control of their life, so that they get the things that they want in every aspect.
Exactly.
Yes. Thank you, Jacqui, for your time once again. It has been an amazing conversation, as it always is. Hopefully we'll come back with some more conversations soon, down the track somewhere. I would like that.
I would too, Faye. Sounds good.
Thank you. I'm Faye Waterman from Talking All Things Business, and we will be back again soon. Bye for now.